At 2:47 a.m. my husband's message lit up my phone. "I'm at Claire's house. Pick me up or it's over." I said, "It's over then." A minute later I forwarded his location to Claire's husband. By morning my ex was on my doorstep, teary, desperate and homeless. That's when I realized peace tastes better than revenge. "Your husband is at my house with my wife." Ryan Fitzgerald's voice came through my phone at 2:48 a.m., exactly 1 minute after I'd forwarded Sean's location to him. I'd been expecting Sean to call to beg to explain why he'd sent that ultimatum from Claire's house. Instead I got Ryan calling from Dubai International Airport, his voice steady despite what I'd just revealed. "How long have you known?" he asked. "About 60 seconds longer than you," I replied, staring at Sean's message still glowing on my screen. "Pick me up or it's over." We both knew it had been over for months. This was just the official notification. The strange thing was, 3 weeks earlier, I'd sat next to Sean at my mother's dining table, still pretending we had something worth saving. That Sunday dinner haunts me now. Not because of what happened but because of how hard I was still trying to unsee the obvious. My mother Dorothy had made her famous pot roast, the one she only made for special occasions, and she kept going on about how perfect Sean and I were together. 4 years next month, she'd said, raising her glass of wine. "You two restore my faith in marriage." Sean had squeezed my hand under the table, his palm damp with what I now know was guilt. His phone buzzed every few minutes, and each time he'd glance at it, type a quick response with his free hand, then return to carving meat like nothing was pulling him away from us. But I saw how his shoulders tensed with each message, how his laugh at my brother Tom's fishing stories came a beat too late, forced and hollow. Before we continue with this story of betrayal and ultimate liberation, if you believe women deserve better than 2:47 a.m. ultimatums from cheating husbands, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps these important stories reach others who need them. That morning I'd found the receipt while doing laundry. Moat and Chandon, $127.43, purchased at 11:47 p.m. the previous Tuesday. He told me he was dealing with a server crash at the office that night. The paper was creased from being shoved deep in his jacket pocket, like evidence hidden in haste. I'd stood in our bedroom holding it, feeling something fundamental shift in my chest. Not heartbreak, not yet. Just the cold recognition that I'd been willfully blind. I tucked the receipt in my purse and said nothing during dinner. Watched him perform the role of devoted husband while my family ate it up. He refilled my wine glass without being asked, told the story about how we'd met at that gallery opening 5 years ago, his hand on my shoulder as he described falling for me instantly. My mother smiled so wide. My father nodded approvingly. Tom's wife Jennifer kept saying we were couple goals. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everyone saw what they wanted to see. Just like I'd been doing for months. The morning routines had become the most telling performances. Sean still made coffee for both of us, but now he'd angle his body away while reading texts, the phone tilted so I couldn't see the screen. Our goodbye kisses had devolved into brief brushes of lips, so quick they barely registered as contact. He'd started showering at night instead of mornings, filling our apartment with cologne that seemed too intentional for sleep. "Big presentation tomorrow," he'd say, already heading to the bathroom at 10 p.m. with his phone in hand. I'd lie in bed, listening to the water run longer than any shower needed to be, wondering if he was texting her from behind the locked door. The smell of his body wash would drift out. Something new he'd bought, sharper and more expensive than his usual brand. Everything about him was becoming sharper, more expensive, more carefully curated. Just not for me. The company summer picnic had been the moment I should have known. 2 months before that 2:47 a.m. message, we'd all gathered at Green Lake Park for volleyball and barbecue. Ryan Fitzgerald had introduced his wife Claire with such pride, his arm around her waist, calling her my better half without irony. She'd barely made eye contact with me when we shook hands, her smile too bright, too brief. But when Sean told his story about the Peterson account, the one he'd supposedly been working late on, Claire laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Her hand landed on his arm and stayed there while she pointed out the dessert table. Such a small gesture but intimate in a way that made my stomach drop. Later, during volleyball, I caught them sharing a look across the net. Not a glance, a look. The kind that carries whole conversations, secrets, promises. Sean missed the ball because he was watching her and everyone laughed except me. I stood there in the July sun, sweating through my sundress, finally understanding why he'd been so eager to attend a company picnic he usually complained about. That was the day I started paying attention instead of looking away. Started noting the gym membership charge on our credit card. Not for the gym 3 blocks from our apartment, but one in Fremont, right near Claire's neighborhood. Started tracking how every Peterson account emergency coincided with Ryan's travel schedule. The Thursday night before that Sunday dinner at my mother's, Sean had called at 7 p.m. to say he'd be late again. His voice had that practiced casualness that tried too hard to sound normal. Peterson's being difficult about the quarterly reports, he'd said. Don't wait up. I stood in our kitchen holding the lasagna I'd made, his favorite with the homemade sauce that took 3 hours, and said, okay. That was all. Just okay. Because what else was there to say? I ate alone at our small dining table, scrolling through his social media, discovering he'd liked every one of Claire's posts from the past month. Beach selfies, morning coffee shots, inspirational quotes about following your heart, and life being too short for regrets. Each heart emoji he'd left on her posts felt like a tiny betrayal, a breadcrumb trail leading to an inevitable conclusion. When Ryan called me at 2:48 a.m. from Dubai International Airport, his voice surprisingly calm, I realized we'd both been watching our marriages dissolve from different continents. Him from hotel rooms in the Middle East, me from our half-empty bed in Seattle. I just bought a ticket home, he said after our initial exchange. I've been collecting evidence for weeks. Madison, my sister, she's been sending me screenshots from Claire's Instagram stories. But I needed concrete proof. And I just gave it to you, I said, my voice steady in the darkness of our apartment. Christina, Ryan said, and I heard the weight of what came next. Thank you. For not letting me be the fool any longer than necessary. We ended the call without goodbye, 2 strangers united by the same betrayal, about to navigate the wreckage our spouses had created while we'd been trying to save marriages that were already dead. I sat there in the dark, Sean's ultimatum still glowing on my screen, and realized this moment had been building for months. Every receipt, every shifted phone screen, every late-night shower had been leading here, to 2:47 a.m. on a random Wednesday, when the pretense finally ended and the truth demanded its due. The credit card statement arrived the following Monday as it always did, tucked between grocery store circulars and a water bill. I almost missed it, would have missed it if I hadn't been looking for answers after Ryan's call. My hands were steady as I opened the envelope, but what I found inside made them shake. Fitcore Gym, monthly membership. $180. The address was in Fremont, nowhere near our Queen Anne apartment, but exactly 3 blocks from Claire's Colonial on Maple Avenue. Sean came home that evening with fresh energy, his dress shirt clinging to him in new ways. His shoulders had broadened, his waist had trimmed. I'd noticed the changes but attributed them to stress, maybe cutting back on beer. Now I understood the 5 a.m. alarms, the gym bag that lived in his car, the protein shakes appearing in our refrigerator. Maybe we should start working out together, I said casually, folding the credit card statement and placing it on the counter where he'd see it. There's that new place on Pine Street running a couples special. He was washing an apple at the sink, his back to me. His shoulders stiffened. I actually prefer working out alone. It's my thinking time, you know? Before the day gets crazy. Right, I said. Fremont's pretty far for thinking time though. The apple stopped moving under the water. He turned off the faucet slowly, deliberately, then turned to face me. It's near the office. I go before work sometimes. His office was downtown, nowhere near Fremont. We both knew it. He bit into the apple anyway, the crunch too loud in our quiet kitchen, and walked past me to the living room. The credit card statement remained on the counter, untouched, unchallenged, a line neither of us would address directly. 2 weeks later, my sister Linda's wedding arrived like a test I was destined to fail. The invitation had been on our refrigerator for months. The Fairmont Hotel downtown, a black tie evening affair. I'd bought a new dress, navy blue with subtle beading. Sean had promised we'd make a weekend of it, maybe stay at the hotel, have brunch the next morning like we used to when we were dating. About the hotel, he said that morning, adjusting his tie in our bedroom mirror. I checked the rates. It's $300 a night. We should probably just drive home after. Linda's wedding is once in a lifetime, I said, already knowing where this was going. We'll stay for the ceremony and dinner. But I've got that early meeting Monday, need to prep Sunday. His reflection wouldn't meet my eyes. At the reception, I watched Linda and her new husband, Michael, dance to their first song. Sean stood beside me, his hand on my lower back in that performative way he'd perfected. My cousin Beth approached during the salad course, her voice gentle with concern I didn't want to acknowledge. "Everything okay with you too?" she asked while Sean was at the bar. "He seems distracted." "Work's been demanding," I said, the excuse automatic now. She nodded, but her eyes said she wasn't buying it. "If you ever need to talk." Sean returned with our drinks just as the main course arrived. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then stood. "I need to take this. Peterson's having another crisis." He walked toward the lobby, phone already at his ear. I watched him go, noting how he ran his hand through his hair as he talked, a gesture he only made when he was nervous. 10 minutes passed. 15. Our food grew cold. When he returned, his hair was slightly messed, his shirt untucked on one side. "Peterson okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just needed to talk through some numbers." He sat down, immediately checking his phone again. 2 more times during the reception he stepped out for urgent calls, each time returning with some small detail out of place. His collar adjusted differently, a faint smell of perfume that wasn't mine, his wedding ring turned slightly on his finger as if it had been removed and hastily replaced. During Linda's bouquet toss, while all the single women gathered on the dance floor, Beth stood beside me at our table. "Sean's been gone a while," she observed. "He'd left for his third call 20 minutes ago." Through the ballroom windows I could see him in the lobby, pacing while on his phone, gesturing with his free hand. Not the movements of someone discussing spreadsheets. "Christina," Beth said softly, "you deserve better than whatever this is." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she didn't understand the pressure Sean was under, that work really was demanding. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I watched my husband through the glass, wondering who was on the other end of that call, who was worth missing my sister's wedding for. The next Thursday, book club ran short. We'd read a thriller about a woman who discovers her husband's double life, and the discussion had been uncomfortably pointed, with too many sympathetic glances in my direction. I left early, claiming a headache, and drove home in silence. Our apartment windows were glowing when I pulled up, which was odd since Sean had texted earlier about working late again. I climbed the stairs quietly, my key sliding into the lock without sound. The door opened to reveal Sean on the couch with his laptop, video chatting with someone. The screen faced away from me, but I could hear a woman's laugh. Bright, familiar. The moment he saw me, he slammed the laptop shut so hard I thought he might have cracked the screen. "You're home early," he said, standing too quickly. "Book club ended early." I set my purse down, noticing things I'd missed in my rush to enter. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, though one had been hastily moved behind a stack of magazines. A candle burning on the mantel. Not one of ours, something expensive that smelled like jasmine and vanilla. The throw pillows rearranged on the couch, creating a cozier space than our usual setup. "Who were you talking to?" "Derek," he said without hesitation. "He's planning something for your birthday. Wanted my input on restaurants." My birthday was 4 months away. Derek had never planned anything for it in the 5 years we'd all known each other. But Sean's explanation came out in a rush, words tumbling over each other about surprise parties and keeping secrets and wanting to make it special this year. The candle flickered between us, its unfamiliar scent filling our apartment. I walked to the kitchen, noting the wine bottle on the counter. A Pinot Noir we didn't have this morning. 2 glasses used, one hastily rinsed and placed in the drying rack. "Derek drinks beer," I said quietly. "He's trying to be more sophisticated," Sean replied, but his voice had gone flat. The next morning I found the candle in our bathroom trash, wrapped in newspaper like evidence being disposed of. The wine glasses were in the dishwasher, run overnight as if that could wash away whatever had happened in our home while I was discussing fictional betrayals at book club. 3 days after that came Ryan's goodbye party at the office. Claire organized it, of course, printing photos of Ryan's various project successes, arranging catering from his favorite Thai restaurant. She wore a black dress that seemed too formal for an office party, her makeup perfect despite the tears she kept dabbing away with tissues. 6 months, she said to the gathered crowd, her voice breaking. 6 whole months without him. Ryan stood beside her, his arm around her waist, looking uncomfortable with her dramatic display. When he caught my eye across the conference room, something passed between us. A recognition, maybe, of performances we were both witnessing. As people started mingling, Ryan approached me near the coffee station. "Christina, I wanted to ask you something." He pulled out his phone, adding my number to his contacts. "Would you mind checking in on Claire occasionally? I know she says she'll be fine, but 6 months is a long time." Behind him, I watched Sean place his hand on Claire's shoulder, leaning in to whisper something that made her laugh through her tears. "Of course," I told Ryan, saving his number in my phone. "I'll keep an eye on things." The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees by the time I pulled into my parents' driveway on Thanksgiving, 3 months after Ryan's departure. The house glowed warm against the November darkness, windows fogged with kitchen heat. I sat in my car for a moment, checking my phone one more time. Sean's last text from 2 hours ago: "Running late. Start without me." My mother Dorothy had the dining room set for 8. The good china, cloth napkins folded into swans, her grandmother's silver candlesticks polished until they gleamed. She'd been cooking since dawn, the turkey a golden masterpiece surrounded by every side dish our family had ever loved. Tom and Jennifer were already there with their twins, my father Harold stationed in his recliner watching football, the house filled with the sounds of a normal family holiday. "Where's Sean?" my mother asked, not for the first time, as she handed me the green bean casserole to place on the table. "He'll be here soon. Work emergency." The lie came so easily now. By 6 p.m. we couldn't wait any longer. The twins were getting restless, and the turkey was starting to dry out despite my mother's careful tenting with foil. We sat down, Sean's empty chair screaming his absence. My father said grace, his voice carrying that particular tone of disappointment he'd perfected during my teenage years. At 7:15 my phone buzzed. "Claire's car broke down. Helping her get to a mechanic. Don't wait up." I read it twice, then set my phone face down on the table. Of course. Claire's car. On Thanksgiving. When every mechanic in Seattle was closed and Ryan was thousands of miles away in Dubai. The table had gone quiet, everyone pretending to focus on their plates while stealing glances at Sean's empty chair. "Is everything all right, honey?" My mother's hand covered mine, her touch gentle but her eyes sharp with concern. "Sean's helping a coworker with car trouble," I said, cutting my turkey into smaller and smaller pieces. My father set down his fork with deliberate precision. The sound echoed in the silence. He didn't say anything, he didn't have to. Harold Brennan had been married to my mother for 37 years. He'd never missed a family dinner for someone else's crisis. By 8 p.m., my mother was wrapping leftovers in aluminum foil, creating careful packages labeled with masking tape. "For Sean," she said, though we both knew he wouldn't eat them. She pressed a container of stuffing into my hands, then pulled me into the kitchen while the others watched football. "Marriage is hard work, sweetheart," she whispered, her hands busy washing dishes that didn't need washing. "But it shouldn't be this hard." The drive home felt endless. Every red light gave me too much time to think about where Sean really was, what he was really doing. Our apartment was dark when I arrived. Cold in that particular way that meant no one had been home all day. I put the leftovers in our refrigerator, still labeled in my mother's careful handwriting, and went to bed alone. Sean came home at 1 a.m., sliding into bed smelling like wine and someone else's perfume, his breathing deliberately steady as if he could fool me into thinking he'd fallen asleep immediately. The following Tuesday, I sat in Dr. Martinez's examination room, my blood pressure reading higher than it should be for a 32-year-old woman. She'd been my doctor for 6 years, had seen me through a miscarriage Sean and I never talked about anymore, knew my body's patterns better than I did. "The anxiety medication doesn't seem to be working," I told her, my hands twisted in my lap. "I can't sleep. My heart races randomly. I feel like I'm waiting for something terrible to happen." Dr. Martinez set down her tablet, her brown eyes studying me with that particular medical combination of clinical assessment and human concern. "Christina, is everything okay at home?" The question unlocked something I'd been holding so tightly it had calcified in my chest. The words tumbled out. The late nights, the gym membership in Fremont, the receipts for dinners I didn't eat, the way Sean looked through me now instead of at me. I talked about finding wine glasses for 2 when I'd been gone, about Claire's tears at Ryan's goodbye party, about Thanksgiving dinner with an empty chair. Dr. Martinez handed me tissues I didn't realize I needed, then sat back in her chair. "What you're describing sounds like situational anxiety caused by ongoing stress. I can increase your medication, but Christina, Medication can't fix a relationship that's causing you harm. She wrote 2 prescriptions. One for a higher dose of anxiety medication, another for a therapist named Dr. Sarah Chen. Then she pulled open a drawer and handed me several pamphlets. Recognizing emotional abuse, gaslighting in relationships, when love hurts. I'm not saying this is what's happening, she said carefully. But education is never harmful. And Christina? Taking care of your mental health isn't admitting failure. It's choosing survival. I left with a paper bag full of resources I was too embarrassed to read in the parking lot. The therapy referral stayed in my purse for a week before I finally made the call. The next interruption to my careful denial came from Madison Fitzgerald, Ryan's sister. She called my work line on a Wednesday afternoon, her voice cautious like someone approaching a spooked animal. Christina? I hope I'm not overstepping, but I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. Is Ryan okay? Ryan's fine. It's about Claire. And your husband. The office suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. I could hear my coworkers typing, living their normal lives while mine tilted off its axis. What about them? Claire has a private Instagram account. She thinks I don't follow it, but I do under a fake name. She's been posting things. Photos that suggest. God, I don't know how to say this. Just say it, Madison. There are photos of them together. Captions about finding happiness in unexpected places and, when you know you know. I took screenshots. I can send them if you want, or we could meet for coffee and... No. The word came out sharper than intended. I mean, thank you, but I can't. Not yet. Madison was quiet for a moment. I understand. But Christina? You're not crazy. What you're suspecting. Real. And when you're ready to see the proof, I'll be here. After she hung up, I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen without seeing it. Janet from accounting stopped by to drop off some reports and found me like that, frozen. Honey, you okay? She asked, and something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer. By the time the corporate Christmas party rolled around 2 weeks later, I'd stopped pretending even to myself. The venue was beautiful. The Fairmont's ballroom decked in gold and silver, a jazz quartet playing standards, an open bar that Sean visited with increasing frequency. I wore a red dress I'd bought specifically to remind him I existed, but he barely glanced at me when I emerged from the bathroom at home. We arrived separately. He'd gone straight from work while I went home to change. When I walked in, I spotted them immediately. Sean and Claire by the dessert table, her hand on his chest, laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. During the CEO's speech about company values and integrity, I watched them drift toward each other like magnets. When the dancing started, they were on the floor for every slow song, his hand too low on her back, her face buried in his shoulder. Our coworkers pretended not to notice, but I caught the glances, the whispered conversations behind hands. Janet appeared at my elbow during "The Way You Look Tonight," pressing a gin and tonic into my hand. My Uber's coming in 20 minutes. You're welcome to share it. I watched my husband sway with another woman to a song we'd danced to at our wedding. Claire's eyes were closed, a small smile on her lips. Sean's wedding ring caught the light as his hand moved up her back. The gold band I'd placed on his finger with such hope now just decorative metal, meaningless. Make it 15 minutes, I told Janet. As we waited outside for the car, the December air sharp enough to cut, Janet squeezed my shoulder. You know the whole office knows, right? We've all been wondering when you'd finally be done with his garbage. I thought about Dr. Martinez's pamphlets, about Madison's offer of screenshots, about my mother's careful leftovers and my father's disappointed silence. About the empty chair at Thanksgiving and the cold bed I'd returned to tonight. The slow unraveling was almost complete. Soon there would be nothing left to untangle. The Uber dropped me at home that night after the Christmas party, and I knew something fundamental had shifted. Not broken, shifted. Like tectonic plates realigning before an earthquake. I stood in our dark apartment, still wearing my red dress that Sean hadn't noticed, and made a decision. If my marriage was going to end, it would be on my terms. Victoria Lawson's office occupied the 17th floor of a glass tower downtown, all clean lines and muted colors that suggested expensive efficiency. I'd found her through a coworker's recommendation, whispered over lunch with the kind of careful tone people use when discussing cancer treatments. The Wednesday after Christmas, I sat across from her mahogany desk, watching her take notes in handwriting so precise it looked printed. "Tell me everything," she said, her reading glasses perched on her nose, pen poised over a legal pad. So I did. The gym membership in Fremont. The missed holidays. The overnight bags packed for late meetings. The Christmas party where they'd dance to our wedding song. Victoria's expression never changed, but her notes filled page after page, occasionally punctuated by small sounds of acknowledgement. "You've been documenting things?" she asked when I finished. I pulled out my phone, showing her the folder I'd created. Screenshots of credit card statements. Photos of receipts. Text messages with timestamps. A spreadsheet tracking Sean's work emergencies against Ryan's travel schedule. They aligned with disturbing precision. Victoria set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Christina, you've been smart. Smarter than most clients who walk through that door. The documentation will help, but we need to protect you financially before he knows what's coming." She explained Washington's divorce laws with the kind of clarity that made complex things simple. Community property. Spousal support. The apartment lease that thankfully bore only my name. A decision I'd made before marriage when my credit was better than Sean's. "You can legally remove him from the lease with 30 days' notice since you're the sole leaseholder," she said, sliding a form across the desk. "I suggest you do it quietly. File it directly with your property management company. Don't tell him until you're ready for him to know." She gave me a list of tasks, each one a small act of revolution. Open my own bank account. Secure important documents. Change passwords on everything. Install security cameras, for safety, she said with a knowing look. Washington is a two-party consent state for audio recording, but video in your own home is perfectly legal. I left her office with a folder full of information and something I hadn't felt in months: control. The elevator ride down felt like descent into battle, but I was finally armed. The next morning I walked into Chase Bank. Not our usual Bank of America where Sean might know the tellers. The location in Ballard was far enough from our usual routes that I wouldn't run into anyone familiar. The new account specialist, a young woman named Amy with kind eyes and discreet professionalism, didn't ask why I needed an individual account when I mentioned being married. "We see this a lot," she said quietly, fingers flying across her keyboard. "Would you like paperless statements?" "Yes. Everything electronic." She helped me transfer exactly half our joint savings, $12,000 that represented years of careful budgeting, vacation funds we'd never use, the start of a down payment for a house I'd never buy with Sean. The debit card would arrive in 7 to 10 business days at my office address. The checks I'd never use went into my purse like evidence of a crime I was about to commit. Walking out of Chase, I felt my phone buzz. Sean asking what was for dinner. I texted back, "Working late tonight. Fend for yourself." The lie came easily, probably because I'd learned from the best. I stopped at a small cafe in Ballard, ordering chamomile tea with hands that shook slightly as I handed over my new debit card for the first time. The transaction went through. Such a small thing, but it felt like the first breath after being underwater. The security cameras arrived via Amazon 2 days later, during Sean's morning workout in Fremont. The package was heavier than expected. 4 cameras, a central hub, cables that would need hiding. I'd watched 3 YouTube installation videos the night before while Sean slept beside me, learning about angles and blind spots and motion detection. The living room camera went up first, positioned to catch the front door and main space. Another in the kitchen, angled toward the dining area. One in the hallway facing our bedroom door. The 4th I tucked into the bookshelf, nearly invisible among my paperbacks, covering the area where Sean usually sat with his laptop. The app on my phone came alive with feeds from each camera. 4 squares showing our empty apartment from different angles. I could check them from anywhere, record footage, receive alerts when motion was detected. The first test came that very evening, Sean arriving home at 6 p.m., normal time, empty-handed. But the next Wednesday the cameras caught him packing an overnight bag at 3 p.m. when he was supposedly in back-to-back meetings. He folded his clothes carefully, the gray sweater I'd bought him for Christmas, his expensive jeans, the cologne he only wore for special occasions. The unexpected network of support began forming without my conscious effort. Janet from accounting had started forwarding me things without being asked. "Thought you should see this," her emails would say, attached with Sean's expense reports showing dinner for 2 at restaurants I'd never been to, charges at hotels during lunch hours, Uber receipts to addresses in Fremont. Marcus, our building's doorman, had taken to greeting me with extra warmth. One evening as I collected mail, he mentioned casually, "Your husband left pretty early this morning. Around 5 a.m. Hope everything's okay with that work emergency." There had been no work emergency. Sean had told me he was going to the gym. "Thanks, Marcus," I said, understanding the gift he was giving me. These tech companies always something urgent. Even Patricia from the coffee shop downstairs had noticed. She'd been making my morning latte for 2 years, knew I liked an extra shot on Mondays, remembered my name without asking. The day after I'd installed the cameras, she handed me my coffee and held my gaze. "You okay, honey? You seem different lately." "Stressed. Just work stuff," I said automatically. She nodded slowly. "That husband of yours used to come in every morning, you know. Haven't seen him in months. Now he gets coffee at that place in Fremont, according to his Instagram." She pulled out her phone, showing me Sean's public profile I'd stopped checking. There he was, tagged at Lighthouse Coffee in Fremont, posted by someone with the username Claire_47. "Men," Patricia said, shaking her head. "They think they're so clever." By New Year's Eve, 2 days away, I had a filing system. Bank statements in one folder. Screenshots in another. Camera footage backed up to the cloud. Written timeline of events that Victoria had suggested I maintain. Contact information for 3 divorce attorneys besides Victoria just in case. The business card for Dr. Sarah Chin, the therapist Dr. Martinez had recommended, finally pulled from my purse and pinned to my bulletin board. Each piece of evidence was another brick in the wall I was building between my old life and whatever came next. Sean had no idea that while he was constructing his affair, I was constructing my exit. He still kissed my forehead each morning, that distracted, obligatory touch. Still said "love you" when he left, the words hollow as an echo. Still came home smelling like jasmine and vanilla, Claire's perfume now as familiar as his cologne. But I was no longer the woman waiting with cold lasagna, hoping for explanations. I was the woman with cameras recording his lies, bank accounts he didn't know about, and a lawyer on speed dial. The war hadn't been declared yet, but I was ready. Every document filed, every dollar secured, every ally identified. They were all weapons waiting to be deployed. The apartment felt different now, even though nothing visible had changed. It was no longer our space but my surveillance zone. Each room held secrets. The hidden cameras, the lawyer's card in my jewelry box, the new bank statements arriving only to my email. I moved through our home like a spy in enemy territory, gathering intelligence for a confrontation that felt inevitable as sunrise. New Year's Eve arrived with the kind of bitter cold that makes Seattle huddle indoors. Sean had left for Derek's party around 9, kissing my forehead with those dry lips that felt like a stranger's touch. Derek was in Tahoe with his girlfriend. I knew because he'd posted Instagram stories all day. But I said nothing, just watched Sean adjust his collar in the hallway mirror, spraying on cologne like armor against his conscience. The apartment fell silent after he left. I poured myself a glass of the Malbec we'd been saving for a special occasion, realizing this qualified. Midnight came and went with no text from my husband, no champagne kiss, no promises for a better year ahead. The city celebrated below my window while I sat in darkness, the only light coming from my laptop screen. Our wedding photos lived in a digital folder titled Forever. Such naive optimism in that naming. I opened it at 12:47 a.m., the photos loading like evidence at a trial. There we were, 5 years younger, stupid with hope. Sean's eyes actually focused on me then, his smile reaching all the way to the corners. I looked radiant in white lace, believing I'd found my person. Delete. The beach ceremony shot vanished. Delete. Our first dance disappeared. Delete. The cake cutting, his mother crying, my father's proud smile. All of it erased with clinical precision. Each photo removed felt like surgery without anesthetic, necessary but brutal. By 1:30 a.m. the folder was empty. 5 years compressed into nothing, leaving only blank space where memories used to live. I moved to the living room, unable to face our bedroom where Sean's pillow lay untouched, that void on his side of the bed that had become permanent geography. The security camera app showed the empty apartment from 4 angles, timestamp running in the corner like a countdown to something I couldn't name. The coffee maker beckoned. Sleep was a fantasy now anyway. The coffee was too strong, bitter enough to make my eyes water, but I drank it black while scrolling through my phone. Sean's location showed him at Claire's house. Not Derek's party. Not some club downtown. Claire's colonial on Maple Avenue, where Ryan's photos still decorated the walls, where his baby's nursery waited empty for his return. At 2:15 a.m., I opened my laptop again and pulled up the document I'd been maintaining for Victoria. The timeline of Sean's deception, each entry dated and detailed. The latest entry, January 1st, 12 a.m. Sean claims to be at Derek's party. Derek is in Tahoe. Sean's location shows Maple Avenue, Fremont. I was adding this note when my phone exploded with the emergency notification at 2:47 a.m. The sound ripped through the apartment silence, that specific tone Sean had programmed for himself, the one meant for true emergencies. My hands were perfectly steady as I read his message. I'm at Claire's house. Pick me up or it's over. The ultimatum sat there on my screen, pulsing with entitlement. He wanted me to drive across the city at 2:47 a.m. to retrieve him from his affair, like I was some kind of ride service for his infidelity. The audacity was almost impressive. I read it 3 times, each reading solidifying something that had been liquid in my chest for months. This was it. The moment everything crystallized into perfect, sharp clarity. My fingers moved across the keyboard without trembling. It's over then. 4 words. No explanation, no emotion, just fact. But I wasn't finished. Ryan's contact information was already pulled up. We'd exchanged numbers at his goodbye party when he'd asked me to watch out for Claire. The irony of that request felt like dark poetry now. I forwarded Sean's location pin with surgical precision, adding a single line. Thought you should know where your wife is entertaining my husband at 2:47 a.m. You're in Dubai, right? The moment I hit send, Sean started calling. The phone lit up with his face. A photo from 2 years ago when he still looked at me instead of through me. I watched it ring, counted the vibrations against the coffee table, then declined the call. He called again immediately. Declined. Declined. Claire's number appeared next, then Sean again, then an unknown number that was probably Claire's landline. The phone became a lightning storm of desperate attempts at contact, buzzing and ringing and lighting up like a casino machine hitting jackpot. I picked it up, looked at the chaos of notifications, then held down the power button. The screen went black. The silence that followed felt sacred, like the moment after confession when sins are supposed to be forgiven. Except I wasn't seeking forgiveness. I was granting myself absolution. The bedroom welcomed me differently now. The bed seemed larger without the weight of waiting for Sean. His pillow no longer mocked me. It was just fabric and filling, meaningless without the person who should be using it. I slid under the covers, my body finding the center of the mattress instead of clinging to my designated side. For the first time in 6 months, maybe longer, I fell into real sleep. Not the fitful, half-aware vigilance I'd been calling rest, but actual deep sleep where the mind finally releases its death grip on consciousness. I dreamed of empty rooms with white walls, of painting them colors Sean would hate. Deep burgundy, midnight blue, that perfect shade of green that looks like forest shadow. I dreamed of silence without the underlying question of where he was, who he was with when he'd come home. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to close the blinds on. No alarm needed. My body woke naturally at 7 a.m., refreshed in a way that felt foreign. The apartment was still silent, but it was a different quality of silence now. Peaceful instead of tense. Complete instead of waiting. I made coffee in the French press, taking time to measure the grounds precisely, to wait the full 4 minutes for it to steep. My phone sat on the counter, still powered off, a black mirror reflecting nothing. The urge to turn it on flickered and died. Not yet. This piece was too precious to shatter with whatever digital chaos waited inside. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and watched Seattle wake up below. People walking dogs, joggers defying the January cold, normal life continuing while mine had just detonated and reformed into something unrecognizable. The coffee tasted perfect, not too bitter, not too weak. Everything felt sharper, more defined, like I'd been looking at life through frosted glass and someone had finally cleaned it. At 8 a.m. I finally powered on the phone. It vibrated for 30 seconds straight, notifications piling up like accident victims. 23 missed calls. 57 text messages. 19 voicemails. The numbers felt like a score in a game I'd already won. Sean's first voicemail, timestamped 2:48 a.m. Baby, Please, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. Claire had too much to drink at a party and I was just making sure she got home safe. Please call me back. Claire's voicemail, 3:15 a.m. sobbing, "You vindictive witch. You've ruined everything. Ryan's coming home. You've destroyed my life." But the one that made me smile, actually smile, was Ryan's 3:45 a.m. "Christina. I'm at Dubai International Airport. I've booked the first flight home. My lawyer will be in touch about the evidence. Thank you for having the courage to do what needed to be done." I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, Ryan's voicemail still echoing in my mind, when I heard footsteps on the stairs outside. Heavy, uneven, like someone climbing who hadn't slept. Through the peephole, I saw Sean standing there at 8:15 a.m., looking like someone had assembled him from spare parts of the man I'd married. His shirt was the same one from last night but wrinkled beyond salvation, half-tucked, with a coffee stain spreading across the chest. The gas station cup in his hand shook slightly, plastic lid not quite secure, threatening to spill. I opened the door but didn't step aside to let him in. The January morning air rushed between us, carrying the smell of his desperation, stale alcohol, Claire's perfume, and the particular sourness of panic. "Chris, thank God," he started, moving forward like he belonged inside. I held up my hand. "You can say what you need to from there." His face did something complicated. Surprise, hurt, then anger cycling through like channels on a broken TV. "It's my apartment too." "Actually, it's not." I pulled the document from the side table where I'd placed it days ago, knowing this moment would come. "You were removed from the lease last week. 30 days notice was filed with management on December 28th. You have until January 27th to collect your belongings." The paper trembled in my extended hand. He didn't take it, just stared like I'd spoken in a foreign language. The gas station coffee slipped from his grip, hitting the concrete hallway with a splash that looked like modern art, dark liquid spreading in directions that made no sense. You can't do that. The apartment's in my name. Always has been. My credit, my deposit, my signature. You're listed as an authorized occupant, which I had legally revoked." Victoria's words came through my mouth, calm and precise. "Your belongings will be available for pickup by appointment." His legs seemed to give up their structural duty. He leaned against the doorframe and for the first time I saw him clearly. Not the marketing executive with the easy smile, not the husband who'd charmed my family, not even the cheater who'd been living a double life. Just a 34-year-old man who'd gambled everything and lost. "Claire kicked me out," he whispered. "The moment Ryan called her from Dubai. She literally threw my clothes on the lawn. Said I wasn't worth losing her marriage over. Said I was just entertainment while Ryan was gone." I wanted to feel something. Sympathy, vindication, even pity. But there was only the cold observation of fact, like watching a nature documentary about predators becoming prey. My phone buzzed. Madison Fitzgerald calling. "I should take this," I said, starting to close the door. "Christina, please." "Your mother knows some good hotels," I said, then shut the door with the soft click of finality. Madison's voice burst through the moment I answered. "Christina, you have to hear this. Claire completely lost it. She's been throwing Sean's stuff on the lawn for the past hour. The neighbors called the cops thinking it was a domestic dispute." Through my window I could see Sean still standing in the hallway, staring at the closed door like it might magically open. Madison continued, her words tumbling over each other with the breathless quality of someone witnessing a car crash in slow motion. "Claire's been playing both sides this whole time. She never intended to leave Ryan, she just wanted attention while he was traveling. She literally called Sean a placeholder in front of the police. Said he was convenient but replaceable. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. Sean had destroyed our marriage for someone who viewed him as temporary entertainment, a warm body to fill empty space. He'd been having an affair with someone who was also having an affair with him. The best part," Madison said, and I could hear the vindictive satisfaction in her voice, "is that Ryan's already contacted a divorce attorney from the airport. Claire's about to lose everything. The house is in his name, the cars, even her credit cards are all authorized user status on his accounts." After Madison hung up, I made myself breakfast. Real breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. Not the coffee and anxiety diet I'd been surviving on for months. I was halfway through eating when my phone rang. Jennifer Colton, HR director at Sean's company. At our company technically, though I worked in a different department. Christina, I apologize for calling on a holiday, but this is urgent. We've received some concerning information about expense report irregularities involving Sean and Claire Fitzgerald. I understand you might have documentation that could help our investigation. I set down my fork. What kind of documentation? Receipts, credit card statements, anything showing personal expenses charged to company accounts. We've received an anonymous tip with Instagram screenshots, but we need to verify the timeline. Anonymous tip. Madison had been busy. I have everything, I said. Dates, amounts, locations. All cross-referenced with supposed client meetings that never happened. Jennifer's relief was audible. Could you email those to me today? We're opening a formal investigation Monday morning. I spent the next hour compiling everything. Every receipt from the Fremont gym. Every dinner charge from evenings Sean claimed to be working. The pattern was damning. Over 6 months of systematic fraud, using company resources to fund an affair. The timestamp showed my email sent at 10:47 a.m. By 11:30, Sean's mother Patricia was calling. I almost didn't answer, but something made me want to hear what she'd say. Patricia Brennan had always been a force of nature. The kind of mother who believed her son could do no wrong, who'd made excuses for every failure, every shortcoming, every red flag I'd tried to discuss with her over the years. How could you? She launched in without preamble, her voice shaking with tears and rage. He's standing in my driveway destroyed because you couldn't forgive one mistake. Patricia, I said, keeping my voice level, it wasn't one mistake. It was 6 months of calculated deception. He was at another woman's house at 2:47 this morning. He's confused. He needs support, not abandonment. Marriage is about working through problems. He made his choice. Repeatedly. For months. Her tears transformed into something harder, meaner. You're heartless. Absolutely heartless. Throwing him out like garbage, destroying his career, humiliating him publicly. Heartless, I repeated, tasting the word. Patricia, heartless is what he did to me while Claire's husband was overseas working to support his family. Heartless is lying every single day for 6 months. Heartless is sending me an ultimatum from his affair partner's house at 2:47 a.m. You're going to regret this, she hissed. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. You'll pay for destroying my son. Your son destroyed himself, I said. I just stopped enabling it. The line went dead. I deleted her number from my phone, another small act of liberation. By noon my security camera app showed movement. Sean had returned with Derek and a rental van, loading boxes I'd packed and left in the building's mailroom as Victoria had suggested. He moved like an old man, shoulders curved inward, that confident posture I'd once found attractive now completely dissolved. Derek kept trying to talk to him, but Sean just shook his head, loading box after box of the life he'd gambled away. The camera caught him looking up at our window once, just standing there in the parking lot, holding a box labeled wedding albums. I watched him through the electronic eye of the camera, feeling nothing but the distant observation of a chapter closing. Derek had just driven away with the last box when Victoria called. The court date is set. February 15th, 9 a.m. Bring everything we've discussed. Her voice carried that particular satisfaction of a lawyer who knew she'd already won. The 6 weeks between that call and the courthouse felt like watching a slow-motion avalanche from a safe distance. Sean hired an attorney, some budget lawyer from a strip mall who specialized in DUIs and quick divorces. I knew because Jennifer from accounting, who'd become an unexpected ally, mentioned seeing Sean in the parking lot of Affordable Legal Solutions, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 5 weeks. February 15th arrived gray and drizzling, Seattle's sky matching the gravity of the occasion. Victoria met me outside the courthouse, her navy suit impeccable, her briefcase containing enough evidence to bury Sean twice over. She'd organized everything into labeled folders: financial records, credit card statements, the Instagram screenshots Madison had provided, even the security camera footage of Sean packing overnight bags for his late meetings. His attorney tried to argue for spousal support, Victoria mentioned as we climbed the courthouse steps. I laughed. Actually laughed. Then I sent him the fraud documentation. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more office than theater. Sean sat at the opposite table, wearing the same suit he'd worn to our wedding, I recognized the tiny wine stain on the sleeve from when my Uncle Robert had gotten enthusiastic during his toast. His attorney, a nervous-looking man named Gary something, shuffled papers like he was looking for a miracle between the pages. Judge Patricia Nakamura presided with the kind of no-nonsense energy that suggested she'd seen every possible version of marital disaster. Victoria presented our case with surgical precision. Each receipt projected on a screen. Each Instagram screenshot time-stamped and verified. The credit card charges to hotels during lunch hours. The gym membership in Fremont. The systematic pattern of deception laid out like a map of betrayal. Your Honor, Victoria said, placing another folder on the judge's bench. The respondent used marital assets to fund his extramarital relationship. Washington law is clear on dissipation of assets. Every dinner, every hotel room, every gift purchased for Ms. Fitzgerald represents money stolen from the marital estate. Sean's attorney tried to object, argue, minimize. But what defense could stand against receipts, screenshots, and Sean's own expense reports showing he'd charged affair dinners as client meetings? Judge Nakamura's expression grew colder with each piece of evidence. When Victoria showed the security footage of Sean packing bags while claiming to work late, the judge actually shook her head. Mr. Brennan, she said, looking directly at Sean, did you believe your wife wouldn't notice $18,000 in unexplained charges over 6 months? Sean mumbled something about stress and mistakes. The judge cut him off. These aren't mistakes. This is systematic deception and financial fraud against your spouse. The ruling was everything Victoria had promised. The apartment remained mine. The savings mine. Half of Sean's 401k transferred to me. He kept his personal debt, including the credit cards he'd hidden, the ones he'd used for hotel rooms and weekend trips with Claire. The judge even ordered him to pay my attorney fees. Another $8,000 he didn't have. Petition for dissolution granted, Judge Nakamura announced. This marriage is dissolved. Walking out of that courthouse officially divorced, felt like stepping out of a dark theater into daylight. Victoria shook my hand, told me I'd been the ideal client. Organized, rational, with evidence that made her job easy. Sean stood by his car in the parking lot, looking at papers his attorney had given him. For a moment, our eyes met across the rain-slicked asphalt. Then I got into my car and drove away, leaving him standing there like a memorial to his own destruction. 2 months later, March brought unexpected sunshine and a text from Ryan Fitzgerald. Coffee? I owe you a proper thank you. We met at a small place in Wallingford, neutral territory away from both our old lives. Ryan looked healthier than I'd expected. Dubai's sun had given him color, and the absence of Claire's chaos had restored something younger in his face. He stood when I arrived, a gesture Sean had stopped making years ago. You saved my life, he said without preamble once we'd ordered. I would have spent years funding her affairs, thinking I was the problem. We saved each other, I corrected. Your call at 2:48 a.m. confirmed I wasn't losing my mind. He laughed, not bitter but genuinely amused. Claire's still posting on Instagram. Motivational quotes about rising from ashes and finding yourself through adversity. She's living with her mother in Tacoma, working part-time at a yoga studio. I pulled out my phone, showing him Sean's latest LinkedIn post about professional pivots and learning from failure. We both laughed then, the free sound of people who'd survived the same storm. He tried to contact me, Ryan said, stirring his coffee. Sean wanted to compare notes about Claire. Like we were going to form some kind of pathetic support group for men who'd been played. What did you tell him? Nothing. Blocked his number. I'm not interested in bonding over mutual stupidity. We talked for 2 hours, comparing divorce settlements, sharing the absurd details that only people who'd been through the same specific disaster could appreciate. Before leaving, we exchanged numbers, not romantically, just as fellow survivors who might occasionally need to confirm that yes, it had really been that insane. The next test came at family dinner that Sunday. I'd finally told my parents and Tom everything. Not the sanitized version I'd been feeding them, but the whole truth. The 2:47 a.m. message, Claire, the investigation, all of it. Tom's knuckles went white around his beer bottle. I knew something was off at Thanksgiving. I should have. You couldn't have done anything, I interrupted. My mother had gone through her own stages of processing. First, disappointment that the marriage had failed. Then, as the details emerged, A transformation into protective fury I hadn't seen since high school when a teacher had unfairly failed me. "I'm updating the Christmas card photos," she announced over dessert. "Already removed him from the last 3 years. Photo editing is wonderful these days. Mom, you don't have to erase history." "Yes, I do." He erased himself from this family the moment he chose another woman over my daughter. My father raised his wine glass. "To Christina's freedom." They all raised their glasses. Tom, Jennifer, even the twins with their juice boxes. The warmth of their support filled spaces in my chest I hadn't realized were cold. 3 weeks after that dinner, I ran into Derek at Whole Foods. Sean's best friend, former best friend, looked uncomfortable between the organic produce and our unexpected encounter. He was buying ingredients for what looked like a dinner party. Good wine, expensive cheese, the kind of spread Sean used to insist we serve when entertaining. "Christina," he said like my name was a question. "Derek. I should tell you, Sean's in Portland now. Working at a startup with our friend from college. Entry-level marketing." Entry-level. After 6 years as a senior account manager. The fall was complete. "He's dating someone," Derek continued, clearly uncomfortable but feeling obligated to share. 24, just graduated. Thinks he's worldly and sophisticated. I felt nothing. Not jealousy, not pity, not even satisfaction. Just the neutral observation of information that no longer affected my life. "I hope she's smarter than I was," I said, meaning it. Derek shifted his weight. "He talks about you sometimes. Says he wants closure to explain." "There's nothing to explain. And closure isn't something he gets to take from me. It's something I gave myself at 2:47 a.m. when I chose to stop participating in his games." I left Derek standing there with his party supplies, understanding finally that indifference was the most complete form of closure possible. The Whole Foods encounter with Derek lingered for about 10 minutes before dissolving like sugar in rain. I finished my shopping, bought myself flowers, yellow tulips that had nothing to do with anyone but me, and drove home to the apartment that had become my sanctuary. The May afternoon stretched golden through my windows, and I opened them wide to let the city sounds mix with my music. 6 months. 6 months since that 2:47 a.m. message had cracked my life open like an egg, letting something new and unexpected emerge. I'd started taking pottery classes on Thursdays, my hands learning to shape clay into bowls and vases that were imperfect but mine. I joined a hiking group that met Sunday mornings, discovering trails I'd never explored during my married years when weekends meant waiting for Sean to decide our plans. The first Saturday of June arrived with unusual sunshine, the kind that brings all of Seattle outdoors. Pike Place Market bloomed with crowds, and I wandered through slowly, no schedule pressing me forward. The flower vendors called out prices, their buckets full of peonies and roses. I was examining sunflowers, their faces broad and unapologetic, when I felt that particular shift in air that means someone is staring. Sean stood 20 feet away, near the fish-throwing station, his hand on the lower back of a young woman who looked fresh out of college. She had that shine of untested optimism, gazing up at him while he pointed at something in the market. Her sundress was the kind of hopeful yellow that suggested she believed in happy endings. I recognized her expression. It was mine from 5 years ago, before I learned that some men treat love like a convenience store, taking what they need and leaving when something better opens down the street. He saw me. His hand dropped from her back, his body turning slightly toward me like a compass finding north. For a moment I thought he might approach, might try to create some scene from a movie where exes exchange meaningful words. His mouth opened, forming the shape of my name. I turned back to the sunflowers. "I'll take 6, I told the vendor, pulling cash from my wallet. Behind me I could feel Sean's presence like weather changing, but I didn't turn around. The vendor wrapped my sunflowers in brown paper, tied them with twine, and handed them over with a smile. I walked past the fish throwers, through the crowd where Sean still stood frozen, his new girlfriend now tugging at his arm with questions I could imagine but didn't care to hear. My indifference wasn't performed. It was as real as the sunflowers in my arms, as solid as the ground beneath my feet. Sean had become a stranger whose story no longer intersected with mine, and that truth tasted like freedom. Monday morning brought Jennifer Colton to my office. Not my cubicle but my actual office, the promotion having materialized in April like a reward for surviving with grace. "The board met Friday," she said, closing the door behind her. "They're creating a new position, Director of Compliance and Ethics. The job is yours if you want it. I set down my coffee carefully. Why me? Because you handled the investigation with complete professionalism while your personal life was imploding. Because you maintained your work quality when lesser people would have collapsed. Because the board believes someone who can navigate that level of personal crisis while protecting company interests is exactly who should be preventing future incidents. The irony was almost poetic. Sean's fraud had created the need for this position, and my survival of his betrayal had qualified me to fill it. The salary Jennifer mentioned made me grateful I was sitting down, enough to not just survive but actually thrive, to travel, to save, to never again be financially dependent on anyone. There's one more thing, Jennifer added. The corner office on 17 is yours. The one overlooking Elliott Bay. After she left, I stood in what would be my new office, watching ferries cross the water like slow-moving promises. Success tasted different when you'd earned it, not in spite of disaster but because of how you'd handled it. Every spreadsheet I'd completed while my marriage crumbled, every meeting I'd run while my life rearranged itself, it had all counted. That evening, Seattle delivered one of its signature summer rainstorms, the kind that arrives suddenly and leaves everything clean. I opened every window in my apartment, letting the rain-scented air fill the space. The apartment had transformed since January. New art on the walls, pieces I'd chosen without committee, colors Sean would have called too bold. Plants everywhere, thriving in corners where his gaming setup used to dominate. Books stacked on surfaces because I no longer had to keep everything magazine perfect for someone who didn't notice anyway. I found myself in the closet, pulling out the folder Victoria had given me at our final meeting. The divorce decree, official and stamped, felt like ancient history even though it was only months old. I considered throwing it away but instead tucked it back in the folder. Not as a reminder of pain but as proof of survival. The rain intensified and I made tea, settling into the couch that was now arranged for one person's comfort, not two people's compromise. My phone sat silent on the coffee table, no longer a source of anxiety, wondering who Sean was texting when he'd come home, what excuse he'd offer. Just a device that connected me to people who actually wanted my presence. That's when the understanding arrived, complete and sudden like the rain. The 2:47 a.m. message hadn't been a destruction. It had been a gift wrapped in barbed wire. Sean's ultimatum, pick me up or it's over, had forced me to make the first honest choice I'd made in months. Maybe years. I'd chosen myself. Not revenge, though that would have been easy. Not the dramatic confrontation that movies suggest we need. Just the simple revolutionary act of saying, it's over then, and meaning it. The peace I felt now wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the presence of truth. Every room in my apartment breathed with honesty. Every plan I made included only my own desires. Every morning arrived without the weight of wondering what lies I'd have to navigate. Revenge would have required continuing to engage with Sean's chaos, spending energy on someone who'd already taken too much. But consequences? Those had arrived naturally, like rain after drought. His job lost to his own fraud. His mistress discarding him once the thrill evaporated. His reputation destroyed by his own documented choices. I hadn't needed to orchestrate anything. Truth has its own momentum. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain against windows, and realized something profound. I would never again wake at 2:47 a.m. to someone else's crisis dressed as my responsibility. That specific time had become sacred in reverse. A moment when I'd chosen peace over drama, silence over chaos, myself over someone who'd already chosen someone else. The young woman with Sean at Pike Place would learn her own lessons in her own time. Derek would eventually stop feeling obligated to provide updates. Ryan and I would exchange occasional texts like veterans of the same war, comparing how much better peace felt than battle. But tonight, in my apartment full of plants and art and silence that felt like music, I understood the final truth. Peace tastes better than revenge because it's permanent. Revenge is a meal you consume once, but peace is a home you inhabit forever. And at 2:47 a.m., when Seattle sleeps and the world holds its breath, I sleep too, deeply, completely, finally free. This story of that 2:47 a.m. message and sweet justice had you on the edge of your seat. Hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Christina simply replied, "It's over then," and forwarded Sean's location to Ryan in Dubai. What was your favorite moment of revenge? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.